And roll it.
I don't want to criticize people who provide abortions because I think they're doing wonderful, important work, but women use the phrase assembly line, and I want to say 2/3 of the interviews. So that was really something that struck me as well.
That's shocking.
Yeah, it's upsetting, and I don't have much more to say about that, but it's true.
What do you want people to take away from these stories?
Yeah, I want people to take away from this that women are maligned no matter what they say about their abortion. The pro-life movement will say all kinds of hateful things if women voice their experiences. And sometimes the pro-choice movement also minimizes people's experiences, and women should be free to interpret and express their own experiences, and they have the authority to do that, and that shouldn't be undermined by political interests. And at the same time, our political conversation should be informed by women's actual experiences and the reality of what it's like to have an abortion and to have to face that choice. That's what I hope people take from this article.
Doing wonderful and important work. Obviously, that jumped out. That entire interview is something that people should listen to because a lot of it will jump out at you. That's Megan Winter, New York Magazine's author of many articles, but including one on abortion and both sides, as she says, the coverage of the abortion experience, if you will. Ben, what jumps out at you?
Well, I think the same quotation that jumped out at you jumped out at me. The very beginning of that, Megan Winters from New York Magazine wrote this story. I think it had a total of 36 different tales of women who had had abortion. And they asked her about the experience, and she's very cagey about the way that she puts it across. She says she doesn't want to say anything negative, but then she acknowledges there's a lot of negativity. But what jumps out at you is that first opening line. I think abortionists are doing important, wonderful work. Wonderful, important work. That's chilling to hear anyone say that. Yeah, I'm old enough to remember, and I believe you are too, the abortion debates in the Clinton era, where abortion was never held out as something that was good or wonderful or without apology. It was always safe, legal, and rare, and the alleged line that the Democratic Party was taking at that time was how we can make abortion more and more rare, generally by expanding socialist programs at home. But that was at least the cover that they gave to their economic expansionism of the federal government and increasing federal government dependence. So when you hear someone exalting abortion as a positive good, it's chilling, it's pathological, and it shows how far that our country has fallen in 20 short years. From, heaven forbid, I never thought I'd be saying it, we've fallen from Bill Clinton into an even deeper moral morass. So that scares me. But if you listen to the rest of the interview, she's very cagey about this. And those who happen to see the video clip either on YouTube or if they're watching the AFR feed right now, saw the body language she used was so very uncomfortable when they said anything negative about abortion. But she said she put out 36 different stories, and she said 2/3 of them said that they had something of an assembly line experience. They had no comfort, no warmth, no bedside manner, no help, whatever. And they felt that it was a negative experience, essentially, which very much comports with what you and I are familiar with, perhaps, from women who have had abortion. And, of course, then there's the long-lasting aspect of this, which she talks about later on in the interview, that women deal with this for months, for years sometimes, and at least at the very end she's willing to acknowledge that there are negative stories and that the other side will give that short shrift. She says that pro-life people say terrible things about women who've had abortion. That's generally not my experience. Generally, it's people on the pro-life side who are willing to hold their hands and help them, and it's people on the pro-abortion side who tell them, yeah, forget about your terrible feelings. It's nothing really important. Which she sort of acknowledges occurs, and at least that is some small crack in what is obviously a very determined ideological point of view from Megan Winters.
The host opens it up, as you see in this interview, and you've talked about the whole interview, and I'm glad you mentioned that because of how the interview went and how it exposed, no matter how much you try to mollify the harshness, the tragedy, the odiousness of abortion, the practice of it, the act, the impact it has, the harmful impact, that tremendous, insidious is an understatement. But you have that, as much as you try, as you mentioned, you hear it, you realize if they put enough examples of telling what abortion does and the experience it has, they can't get around it. Ben?
Yeah, well, she talked to 36 women, people who are involved in crisis pregnancy centers or in groups like Rachel's Vineyard or other post-abortive healing ministries. Have talked to hundreds of these cases, and you see the long-lasting damage that it does, whether women say outwardly that they regret it or they say that it wasn't, or they feel that they didn't have any other choice, either because they were pressured or they didn't realize that there were any resources available to help them. It leaves deep, lasting scars. Again, she said that pro-life people say terrible things about women who do this. This has simply not been my experience.
Yeah, I was curious about that. Real quick, you're talking about them yelling murderer, you're going to Hades at their, just in essence being aggressively attacking them both in and outside, when they're going in and outside the abortion clinic. You're the U.S. Bureau Chief of LifeSite News. What's your experience, generally speaking, at these abortion centers with protesters?
Yeah, well, it's impossible to prove a negative, so I'm not going to say these things never happened. Perhaps it did somewhere that I haven't seen. However, my experience and that of most people who have been there is an event sort of like 40 Days for Life, where you have people outside an abortion clinic who are praying, and that's it. They are generally in prayer. Oftentimes, they're completely silent. They may have a sign that says, reconsider, or abortion harms women, particularly if they've had an abortion. But typically, their only presence to women is to offer to pray for them, to offer to help them, to offer to give them resources so that they can keep their children. And quite often, that's exactly what they decide to do. They change their minds when they realize someone in the world is willing to help them, even if it's not the father of the child or their own parents or their own family. Someone in the world is willing to reach out and help them and help their unborn child. So that's been my experience, is that the pro-life movement is peaceful and it's loving and it's helpful.
And speaking to people directly involved in the movement, crisis pregnancy centers. I have a wonderful mother-in-law who runs a few crisis pregnancy centers, and meeting the people that she has it's amazing to see the hearts. But I see, and the theme we've been going with tonight is the characterization of other people. The left having to believe that the right is so awful, that we have horns and we are what Chris Matthews says we are. And when, to me, that is their way of saying, I'm not going to listen to a thing you say, because they realize that they hear us when we're speaking salt and light, or being salt and light and speaking truth and love. They don't have a chance. Ben?
Absolutely, they don't. They have to do what Saul Alinsky said so carefully: pick the target, personalize it, polarize it. That's what they do. So right now, the crisis pregnancy centers are at the focus. There have been maybe 8 to a dozen articles, major articles on left-leaning websites like Slate and Salon and Mother Jones and things of that sort, picking on crisis pregnancy centers, talking about how dangerous they are. And when you get into this, during the Ken Cuccinelli, Terry McAuliffe race in Virginia, Planned Parenthood and Terry McAuliffe teamed up to demonize, and NARAL, I should say, of Virginia, teamed up to demonize crisis pregnancy centers. They had a video, Lies That Crisis Pregnancy Counselors Tell. And a friend of mine wrote an article about how the 5 or dozen lies that they put out, there was not a single falsehood in them. Every single thing that they said was true. They just didn't like it. And they couldn't prove anything substantive was wrong. It was the sort of point and sputter style of journalism. Can you believe the terrible things that they say that offend us? Sometimes the truth is offensive, and if it is, it's much easier to live with the truth. One of the lies that they said that the crisis pregnancy centers told was, at one point, the counselor had told a woman that if a woman chose an abortion, at some point you would stand in heaven and you might get to meet that child. Now, my first thought was, how do they disprove that?
Mm-hmm.
How do you prove that's a lie? But then, second of all, I mean, what
Yes.
they're saying is there's no afterlife, there's no God, there's no judgment.
And that's, yeah.
Anyone who believes that is a lie.
Yeah, and Ben, I would like to have you on at 7:10 tomorrow night, if possible. I'd like to schedule it because there's also a follow-up, and you're working on a story. We're getting out of time, and I'll link the story that you're working on as soon as it's up. And if it's up, pardon me, I'll get it up on the Facebook page. Encourage people to go to American Family Radio, Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth Facebook page, nothingbutTruth.com. You can do that. I want to thank Ben because this war on women, they're sticking with it. As I said, they're sticking with those who are trying to defend a failed record are going. They're going and taking it to 11. You would think the war on women, all the information, how it's substantively, it's just not there. No, they're going and they're getting even more extreme with their charges. So live with honor in your life. AFR Talk.